Welcome to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. I'm your host, Derrick Broze. With every episode of the Activation, we will explore solutions in the areas of health, permaculture, decentralized technology, spirituality, and hidden truths. The Activation Podcast is focused on providing cutting-edge solutions to empower humanity. Hey everyone, it's Derrick Broze, and I'm here with another episode of the Activation Podcast, and this is probably the most special one yet, because I get to talk with my love, Miriam Gomez, who many of you out there have met Miriam while we've been traveling the last couple years doing, well, since we've been together, we've done 3 U.S. tours, we've done a Mexico tour. Miriam's traveled with me to Costa Rica, of course, Mexico, all over the U.S., and met many of you, and has her own just amazing path and story to tell. So I wanted to bring her on the show today to share what she has going on in her life.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining me, baby. So we got a bunch of topics we're going to get into. We're just going to see where this conversation goes, but why don't we start at the usual place. Some people have heard you explain your story of how you got on this path and others haven't, so maybe you can just share it with me, tell me again, and I might probe and ask a little deeper than you usually share.
All right, let's do it. So I think I'll start before we met. I guess you could call it activism is what's started before we met, and that pretty much got started about 5 years before I met you. I was not somebody thinking of like, oh, I'm going to go into activism. Oh, I'm going to go into meditation or the different things that are a big part of my life now. But do I start with my childhood?
Start wherever you want. Go as far back or as relevant as you think it is.
Meditation. I think that's where things really started for me. I went through a really hard breakup, and I say it like that because I think some of us maybe think that those things are silly, or at that age maybe we think they're silly, or maybe I thought they were silly, but it was such a precious time in my life that so with this breakup I started realizing just how depressed I was back at that time in my life. And for me, sincerely, I noticed, well, the people around me that are also going through some tough times, they're going to doctors and they're on pills, and that wasn't calling out to me. So I got on the computer and I just started researching what causes depression and how to lift myself from it. And I started learning about exercise and how exercise helps our brain's activity and helps our mood, and it helps clear some things up mentally and emotionally. So I started exercising. And through my exercise, I sincerely started finding more joy and started finding a beautiful perspective within myself, where I started seeing all the lovely things in the world, and I started noticing all the lovely things within myself. So I kept exercising, right? I loved it. It was honestly kind of like a drug, and coincidentally, because people are taking drugs for depression, but here I am running for my own
taking your own body's drugs.
Yeah, taking my own body's drugs. And so I'm running, lifting weights, and I'm learning more, right? I'm loving it. So I'm loving the changes, the effects it's having on me. So I keep searching some, keep researching. And so I went into learning about nutrition. And this was the very first time I dove into nutrition. This is the very first time this topic came up in my family, because nobody really ever focused on nutrition. So this is all new to me. Exercise too, all of it. So I go into nutrition, and I start finding out about organic foods. And that was just such a curiosity, learning that word, organic. Because to me, in my point of view then, and you can call it naive, whatever it is, but I thought, wait a minute, aren't all the foods supposed to be good for us and healthy for us and not toxic at all? And so for me, there was a red flag there. And at the same time that I'm learning about organic foods, about nutrition and about exercise, I'm meditating. I learned about meditation and mindfulness and how meditation can help me gain a greater perspective on my life and who I am and what I'm dealing with. And it did at that point in my life, and it continues to. So I was meditating at the same time, and a lot of my life then was very reactionary. Is that the word? Reactionary. And I was noticing it, everybody in my family. And so it really helped me be more observative and proactive and be able to have deeper conversations with my family members and really be able to show up in my life and in my family's lives the way that I felt had deeper meaning and deeper purpose. And one of those ways was just sharing what was clearly becoming my passion, which was meditation, health, well-being, dealing with our traumas, dealing with our anxieties and our pain and things that weren't always necessarily being talked about in my family. And I think that's just very normal in a lot of families. But so of course I'm the one in my family talking about, let's eat organic, let's go exercise, let's go for a walk, let's read some books, let's learn some more and grow together. And coincidentally enough, there was a lot of openness in that. I started finding myself at the gym exercising with my aunt, with my two cousins, with my sister, with another cousin. And here I am going to Zumba classes with them, and they too are going through their own journey now. And so I started to see how that was the beginning of me starting to see how we impact each other's lives.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about your meditation journey and the health journey, but also one other thing that you sometimes don't mention is the activism in Woodlock and in your own neighborhood, and how that, is I think the most important, truest form of activism, which is activism in your own community that actually impacts. It's one thing to protest. It's a good thing to go out there and express yourself no matter what, but it's one thing to protest something that's far away and distant and kind of untouchable, like war. For example, we can go out and protest war and it feels good, but everybody knows the war is not going to end tomorrow. But then there's things in your own
their backyard.
And it's exactly. It's something that's not in their control. Whereas a lot of times activists ignore what's happening in their own backyard, in their own neighborhoods, or their communities, or the cities, or the towns they live. So talk a little bit about that. About just you don't have to get into the whole thing, but just how that was another form of your activism, in addition to questioning the food and meditation, and eventually Standing Rock when we met. You were already kind of seeing injustice in your own community.
Yeah, and that started happening right around the same time that this meditation and healing journey was going on. So that was the next element, actually. So in our neighborhood where my mom lives, where a big part of my family lives, they form a part of a very small city of Woodlock. And which
is just 2 streets.
It's just 2 streets. It's one neighborhood, 2 streets, and that's the city of Woodlock. But my mom's neighborhood, the one mile long street, it's outside of the city of Woodlock, and they're actually a part of a bigger city of Conroe. But the city of Conroe didn't have the resources to provide water for my mom's neighborhood, River Oaks. And so the city of Conroe asked the city of the town of Woodlock to provide the water services. Well, it turned out all of a sudden one year, the water bill is coming at $150 a month, and then it jumped to $350 a month. This is for one household, and that's just not normal. And so a lot of us in the neighborhood got together and were asking questions like, why is the water bill so high? So a lot of people are starting to show up to the town of Woodlock's meetings, and people are asking questions, but what people are getting is not a lot of answers. And the town of Woodlock is starting to say like, oh, this is for maintenance reasons. And it wasn't what the information that they were giving the neighbors just wasn't being justified, or wasn't justifying the high bill rates. So a lot of us got together, and I say I don't know why they chose me as one of the voices to represent the town, but I think I understand why. It's because I actually cared to make sure that there was justice done. And I'm bilingual, and I know a lot more of my neighbors than a lot of the neighbors know each other. So there was that, and I had the time and the energy to be a part of it. And I wanted to. I didn't think it was right? So I'm a part of this group, and just...
and you're saying they basically chose you to be like the spokesperson?
They chose me to be the spokesperson for my mom's neighborhood, which was a mile-long street of pretty much Hispanics and Spanish-speaking folks, and not a lot of them spoke English. So there was a representative for our street, which was me. There was a representative for 2 other streets, because besides us, the town of Woodlock was providing water to 2 other streets outside. And so we were blessed that one of the other neighbors from one of the other streets that was a part of the coalition. We created a coalition. And this was the very first time that I ever got involved in any legal activity, in any like activism of any kind. It was just wanting to figure out why my neighbors and my mother are getting charged way too high, like outrageous prices for water. So luckily, one of the neighbors in the other streets was a paralegal, and incredibly smart woman, and so caring. And so she wanted to form a part of the group, and she said, we can do this together, and we can get to the bottom of this, and we can make sure that this never happens again. So what we found out through open records requests was that the town of Woodlock's mayor had what is it called? Maintenance for their town pool, for their town hall building, for cutting the grass around their neighborhood, for pipes for the water and the sewage and all of that. But none of it was getting done. Yet on their itemized like expenses and all of that, it showed that they were spending hundreds of dollars on all these different
something under.
Yeah. And then we found out in open records requests that the town of Woodlock applied for a loan from I forgot if it was the city of Conroe or the state of Texas. Applied for a loan to put in new pipes for the sewage, for the water, and maintain the tanks. Hefty loan that they got, and 90% of it was what is it called? It was kind of like a donation. It was a grant. It was a grant, and then 10% of it had to be paid back. So the reason why they were able to get 90% of that loan become a grant and only 10% was required to be paid back was because about more than 50% of the people that the town of Woodlock was providing water for were under poverty level, and that 50% came from only my mom's street. And so my mom's neighborhood was the street that allowed them to get this loan and allowed them all of this money for free, as a donation practically, and they only had to pay it back 10%. Well, what they ended up doing was charging the 10% that needed to be paid back for that to the outside city ratepayers. So there are 2 streets of the town of Woodlock didn't have to pay back the loan, but the outside city streets, the 3 streets, including my mom's, had to pay back that loan. Well, what we found out, what we already knew, is that the water facilities and like the pipes and all that, none of it was getting worked on. Yet here we are having to pay $350 bills every month to pay back for this loan, this 10%.
So the high water bills were really paying back
To pay back.
this money that they got from the government to fix up things that they probably spent on who knows what.
Right.
And I remember you telling me there was suspicion too of like the lady making money or pocketing some of this money.
So that's what we were seeing.
The
and
main
that's
woman.
Yeah, and so the mayor, we're seeing her with a brand new car, like a really nice brand new car, and we're like, dang, she's getting paid really well. Where's that money coming from? And then we're seeing that the maintenance, the guy that like cleans up the park and all that. And I mean, this is just 2 little streets. This is a tiny little park. There's tiny little pieces of grass that need to be cleaned up. The pool, nobody uses the pool, but all of these services are getting paid for really really well. Like he's getting paid really well for all the services that he's doing. Yet none of those services are opened up for the outside city ratepayers, And so anyway, so we're starting to see where that money is going, and so we were able to take them to court, and we were able to get the judge to ask them to lower the bills and for it to never happen again. So luckily that was all done. We succeeded at that, but it was a moment where I started to realize, like, wow, people in power will really take advantage whenever they can.
Even if it's just they're a mayor of 2 or 3 streets.
Yeah, and especially because people...
Because no one's looking.
Won't look.
Yeah.
People won't ask questions. Not until it's really affecting their pockets, or really affecting them at their homes and all those things. So
I think that's been an important lesson probably for both of us, but for any activists out there, that when you get involved and you start paying attention to whatever issues get you concerned, water, food, air, police violence, government corruption, whatever, you realize, like, you start to dig in, and especially when you're looking at things that, like, for example, that was a conspiracy, whether it's a conspiracy of a woman and 2 other people to say, hey, we're going to do this. Somebody had to make decisions to say, hey, we're going to pay this off with this thing. They conspired together, and they figured nobody's paying attention. This is a Mexican neighborhood north of Houston in Conroe that nobody really even knows exists. We'll probably be able to get away with this, right? And if people didn't, as you said, like, kind of start worrying, like, hey, why are these bills so high? I can't pay this. And in this case, it was literally the fact that the people couldn't afford to pay the bills. Had it been, like, let's say, a richer neighborhood where somebody's paying less attention to the monthly bills because they're not living check to check, maybe this would have gone on a lot longer, right? Because they wouldn't have been paying attention. But because people were having to deal with this, like, their finances are being threatened, they can't pay the bills, and they know something's up, people take action, you take action. It got local news coverage, I remember you saying. And, you get all these really important lessons. And that's just, I think that's so important because, again, a lot of people out there paying attention to what's going on internationally, nationally, across the country, wherever they live, but maybe not even have any idea who is in power down the street from them and what they're up to. And I just think that's so important. So, you have this journey of questioning food, and you've told me before, like, questioning the FDA and questioning the agencies, because of course, like, maybe we all at one point had these naive assumptions that the food out there is just good for you, because whenever they give you the recommendations, it's just eat fruits and veggies. They don't tell you, oh, by the way, probably focus on organic because the other stuff's sprayed with pesticides. FYI. It's just like, oh, we just think if I'm eating greens and veggies and stuff and I'm doing that and moderately working out, then I'm probably going to be a healthy person, not thinking of all the toxins and stuff. And then you and I got connected around 2016 through Standing Rock, and we've been together now for 7 years, and as I said earlier, we've gone on 4 tours, 3 in the US, 1 in Mexico, done events all over North America, all over this side of the Western Hemisphere of the world. We're coming to the UK soon. And and it's just been, I can say that it's been a beautiful journey to be connected with you, to have a partner that cares as much as I do about different things and similar things, and because we're not always focused on the same thing, which I love. Like, health is important to me, but it's not always my strongest or my focal point for research, and oftentimes you're picking up things in food or health or dental health or gum health and gut biome and all these things that are interesting to me, but that I just haven't made time to look at yet, that you have. And then you let me know, like, hey, babe, we need to start soaking our oats so that we're not getting anti-nutrients and different stuff like that. Soak your oatmeal. I learned that from her. And I don't know, I just love that. I love that balance, because I know that a lot of times I'm focusing on things that are really dark or heavy or can be, and solutions. But yeah, I love that interplay. And then maybe you can share whatever you want about that. But just your, you mentioned like your previous relationship ending, and I was getting out of a relationship about a year and a half before we met. And a similar thing as far as just the relationship ending for different reasons, but overall, like a big shift in my life. I was already doing activism and journalism, but that end of that relationship was another kind of big, like, all right, I shaved my head. I was starting over fresh and clean in a lot of ways. And then, meeting you not too long after that was a really important point. And I honestly do think that the last 7 years of my work, we've been 2016 to going into 2023, and I've told you this before, that I don't think this work would be the same without you in my life. So I know that it's been really special for us to spend this time together and to do it in that way, like somebody else who is an activist. And you and I we meet other people out there. You guys tell us, is like, oh, I wish I had a partner who cared about these things, or maybe the opposite. They have a partner and they don't see any of this stuff and they feel very alone, or it causes arguments or discussions. And so, yeah, anything you want to share just on that? I'm kind of rambling now about how much I love our relationship, but anything you want to share about, that journey of getting into activism and then us connecting, and we've been together now 7 years doing all kinds of things that we can talk about next.
Yeah, and I want to say I love our relationship, and, we're not perfect, and we just continue to put the effort and the action behind our love, and that's what I've seen from the very beginning, and I think that that's why we've been able to have this beautiful love all these years and continues to get stronger. So thank you.
And it's been a fun love.
It has. I do want to say though, like, we do get that a lot whenever we're traveling. A lot of people saying like, oh, I wish I had a relationship like you guys, or a lot of people even too, like, they can't speak to their family members about a lot of these things and stuff. And I want to bring up that point again, that I went through a depression. Like, being alone and working on myself is what helped me come out of my own cloud, and what helped me start seeing the reality of things, and the poisoning in our food, and the corruption in government, and had me questioning every area, or every area of government. So I will just say on that, it is, in my point of view, super important to, in a way, go through your own dark night of the soul and really find out who you are, and get to see yourself and learn about yourself and learn how to lift yourself up and be a light in the world. Because we can try to talk to our lovers or our family about all the things that matter to us, but if we're not being a good example of the world that we want to live in, or the changes that we want to see, then we're really hammering our head up against the wall. I think seeing the example that we are is what people really get attracted to, So I'll just say that is, live the life that you really want to live, and be the change that you want to be, and your families and your friends and everybody will see how attractive that is, and start coming to you to ask you about COVID and health and well-being and life and all that.
I think
stuff.
That's really what we've seen, like, even just in the time we've been together, and maybe some of you can resonate, that really it's choosing to put whatever your principles, your values, your goals are first before everything, and then by not only like, okay, I'm going to read about this or learn about this and watch it on YouTube and then try to convince all my family to care about it, but living it, just leading by example. I mean, that's really the only thing that works. It's the only thing I've learned that works, and that I've ever tried to do, is just okay, I don't like the way this is happening. I'm going to try to do it a different way, or I'm
Absolutely.
going to show somebody it can be done differently. And, you know, and then through that, yeah, you attract a partner, friend, business partner, whatever that may mean. I know plenty of people out there are looking for love in that way, for somebody to have that balance, which I think is important, to balance the feminine and masculine energy. And yeah, just by leading by example and doing what you're committed to doing, both parties eventually like attract each other. Because I mean, it's that whole thing. We could go deep on it, but maybe not this episode. But I think generally speaking, we both believe in like the power of what is sometimes called the law of attraction, or just, you know, for me, like I learned about creative visualization and manifestation and meditation and how all those things come together. And it's not just talking, just praying, just meditating on something and expecting it to happen, but like being able to visualize it, draw it, write it, say it out loud, and then like bringing, you know, putting action behind all that stuff. That to me is what the law of attraction really is. Like, okay, I want this quality or this thing or this job or this thing that I'm trying to attract abundance or whatever it is that, and especially when it comes to a partner, like I want somebody who's as passionate as me or somebody who cares as much as me. And I think whether probably more unconsciously, subconsciously, because I'll admit when you came, I wasn't 100% ready, but I was ready, just not, I didn't know it yet. I needed to figure it out. But unconsciously, subconsciously, I think myself was like wanting to attract you and all the qualities that you embody. Going from a relationship where I felt like I didn't have a friend or a partner that was as passionate about anything that, you know, not necessarily just what I was passionate about, but about anything. And so I constantly was feeling like, all right, like I've got all this potential and like this thing, but also as my work and life was growing, very different from you and I didn't want to bring my partner into that. I didn't want, it was like, this is a different world, because I could just tell there was like out of alignment. I think again, subconsciously, I felt like there's no need to connect these things because this is not going to be very long. And then, you know, when we got together and I saw how passionate you were about your own, you know, you've been an entrepreneur, had your own business, and learning that you've had like activism and stuff going on, it's like, wow, she's got her own things. Like, it's really awesome. I'm having a lot of fun spending time with her, but also she's just doing her thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like we probably both were unconsciously, subconsciously calling in each other, or the qualities that each other have or are capable of having in our best moments. And yeah, it's really powerful. And so, I mean, I think that's just, I guess, some advice to any of you out there looking for love in these different ways is live and embody what you want to see. Absolutely. What you want somebody, you know, don't like kind of just get angry. And I think I'll speak for as a man, I think there's a lot of young men on the internet and online, you know, just in the world, that are like very bitter towards women. They haven't been able to connect with women. They're uncertain maybe about their own security, their own sense of self, and they you know, you see this a lot in the meme culture and the so-called incels, you know, involuntary celibates. And this is not dogging anybody. I'm just saying I've seen this a lot where young men, and we've met people like this, who have a lot to offer and could have a lot to offer, maybe a partner, but maybe aren't as confident as they could be in their own self, or that confidence or that lack of confidence, that insecurity, that pain really turns into like anger towards women, or like, you know, kind of, I don't know if it's like anti-feminism, but there's a lot of things tied up in there.
Absolutely. And I think it's similar with women too, and I'll speak for the young women out there, and the young Miriam out there. That insecurity has a lot of us women searching for love in all the wrong places, looking for partners that will fulfill like this void, this pain, this darkness inside of us, or that need for love, you know? And it's a very basic human need. But I think for me and what I learned, and I would just suggest this as well to a lot of those women out there, is to learn to love yourself and learn about yourself and how to take really good care of yourself. Like, whenever you feel the need for love and compassion, how can you show that to yourself? And how can you find your own happiness, you know, without a partner? Because, I mean, that's just what I did. But I wasn't looking for you. I wasn't looking for a partner. You know, I was just living my life. I was just designing my life to be as fulfilling as possible for me and enjoyable as possible. And also, I was just living my life. And I think like what you're talking about with the law of attraction, like embodying what it is that we're looking for, what it is that we want. I was right where I wanted to be, right where I needed to be. And as soon as I heard about your qualities, I knew this is what I want too, because I'm confident in who I am and what it is that I want, what are my desires. So I know what's made for me whenever I see it in the world. And I could clearly see too, because of the meditation, just whenever I was attracted to another man, and it was more so to fulfill a need. It wasn't necessarily coming from like a place of like, I'm whole, and I see he feels that and sees that too for himself, and we could be and do and enjoy this life even more together, like we can do so much more together. Like, you see the potential in what a relationship could be like that, versus seeing another person and thinking about just having, like, sleeping together, or filling that void inside of oneself, right? So I think I would just say that to the women out there as well, is find love within yourself, learn ways to love yourself, and be happy by yourself, and that partner will show up in the world, and you'll know exactly who it is when that happens.
Sweet. I think that's really good advice for anybody, really. Let's go to a new area. We got maybe 15, 20 minutes. We'll probably do more of these conversations. As you guys can tell, Miriam and I could talk about a lot of different things, and periodically when we're just having our walks and talks, because I think any good, healthy relationship should have walks and talks together. We just talk about so many things, and there are times when we've said, like, oh, this would be a good public conversation, or I think people would want to hear more about this. So let us know, comment below wherever you're listening if you'd like to hear more of these. But a couple other things I want to mention is homesteading and the Conscious Agora. This is, you guys have by now heard, wherever you're following, Miriam and I do some updates with Jess and Ethan, and seen pictures of the land. If not, go to theconsciousagora.com. This is a project that I've been writing about since really right at the time we were meeting. I had been already, prior to meeting Miriam, you can go back, actually, if you go to theconsciousresistance.com and check out the Conscious Agora category, you can see all the videos I've done on this since 2016, when I was first launching a homestead project in Texas. That's what was the original vision, and I was working with the beginning of the Houston Freedom Cell there, and it was really just very much an abstract idea. I definitely didn't have any money or anything, just knew that that's what I wanted to do. And then shortly after that, Miriam and I met, I think just a few months after I put that video out. So we've been talking about community stuff since the beginning. And then that was also just a couple months into our relationship when I was invited to speak at Acapulco in 2017. And we started visiting Mexico to see Miriam's family and just to get to know Mexico. I hadn't been once or twice, and I hadn't been in like at least 10 years. She hadn't been since she was a little girl. So we started traveling to Mexico together, and pretty quickly realized that, like, one day we wanted to come to Mexico and be in Mexico, and that for me, as I started to spend more time in Mexico, and of course started to see the situation in the U.S. get more and more tyrannical, it felt less likely that doing things in Texas was going to be the answer for me, at least. It doesn't mean there's not freedom people. There's people all over Texas doing wonderful things. But also, I'll just be real. Financially, I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to afford this land. Even the cheapest land is just going to get me a tiny little spot with no fruit trees and no water and nothing, And so I started looking more to Mexico, but it was in the beginning of our relationship. Actually, you might remember it was like the first winter we spent together, and my writing partner, John Vibes, who is my co-author in the Conscious Resistance trilogy up there, which you can find again on consciousresistance.com. We had already written 2 books, the first 2 books in the Conscious Resistance trilogy before Miriam and I met. Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality, and Finding Freedom in an Age of Confusion, which you can find on the website. And we were getting ready to write the final book of this trilogy, which to me is the most important because it really gets deep into, like, how are we going to create a free society, supposedly, hopefully a world, a stateless society where people are basing their actions and their choices on voluntarism and non-aggression principle and individual sovereignty. And then for me, it was important to bring in permaculture principles, which I was just starting to learn a lot about in this time, as well as mindfulness, which has been important to me since I went to prison. And as you were saying, meditation was important to you. So John and I sat down for 7 days in his cabin in the woods up in the northeast of the U.S. It was full of snow, and we planned this out. I flew up to him, and for a week we just sat in the cabin, and I remember being on the phone with you every day because we'd only been together for a few months. And I was like, I'm going to write this book with my friend. We're going to just knock it out. John was also dealing with cancer at the time, too, so we were just like, it was a very weird schedule, but we made it work, and in 7 days I did most of the writing while bouncing ideas off John and getting his input. And we came up with this vision. And the last section of that book is all about us dreaming up. And again, I'll say mostly me, because John is probably not the kind of person that's going to end up in an intentional community. He's already got his land, his family and stuff. I think he's set where he's at. But together we thought of, well, if we wanted to create a community in this future world without government, or with a lot less government, what would that look like, and how would we design that? Not saying like this is the way everybody should live, or this is the best way everybody should live, or any of that kind of stuff. Just what does our specific community look like in all the different communities that are going to exist in the future? And it was something that I called the Conscious Agora, and it was based on permaculture principles, mindfulness, and individual liberty. And that's all the book really talked about, is just this idea, and that eventually this could flourish into a network of communities all around the world. So we published that April 2017, I think. And like I said, I originally thought it was going to be in Texas, and a couple years into that, Miriam and I visiting Mexico, we realized Mexico was really where this was going to happen, and also started to realize it was something that we were going to do together. Mm-hmm. And so by now, I won't repeat the whole story because I've done several podcasts talking about this, but we moved to Mexico during COVID, been looking for land. It's been 3 years now between Houston and Mexico. We found the land. The land is amazing. Again, go to theconsciousagora.com. And as we're recording this, we're maybe weeks or a month, just over a month or so away from this land becoming ours. So I say all that, like how has that all that felt for you, baby? Like just through this whole journey. I mean, it's
felt exciting. It's been a big learning experience for me, and a big realization of like, wow, this is really what I wanted all along. And I didn't know how like the puzzle pieces were coming together, but hindsight, I see whenever you introduced me to anarchism, whenever we met and you're telling me about anarchism, and this word is so new to me, but the principles are not. Like me living in our family, in our culture, it has always been about taking care of each other and loving each other and not hurting each other, right? And not doing wrong to each other. And we've always been entrepreneurs in our family. And so whenever you told me about anarchism, it just clicked. It clicked for me. And then about mindfulness, that was a no-brainer. About permaculture, well, for me, it has been very important to be living in harmony with the land and with all life around us. And so for me, that was another like key in the lock whenever we came across permaculture. And then just knowing too that just my mom and my dad both lived on farms, and my mom closer to permaculture. My grandparents, my mom's parents, had their own farm, and they were growing their own food. And so my parents came, like, I didn't know this, but whenever I started becoming interested in growing my own food, which was actually right before I met you, I started realizing that my family carries with them all this wisdom, how to grow their own food organically and in such a sustainable way, how to live sustainably. And we weren't really taught that, And so now I get to pick their brains and their hearts and really see that, wow, there was so much joy in them living that lifestyle, So for me, it's like, I get to, in a way, bring this back to my family, to my lineage, And I learned from my grandparents just how to grow food and how to make our own medicine and how to take care of ourselves. So, like you mentioned, whenever we came to Mexico, we started feeling a connection to Mexico. And the very first trip that I made with you was the very first time that I came back as an adult. And I immediately felt that connection to the land. And I remember telling you, and we were in Zihuatanejo, on the little bridge, whenever I told you I want to live in Mexico one day, So for us, whenever COVID came around and we were thinking about what we wanted to do, it was a no-brainer. Let's continue the vision, the idea, the desire, the dream of building a community, and let's do it in Mexico, where our hearts call out for us. So it's been a very enjoyable journey, but definitely a learning curve for me. Learning to build these relationships, learning about the legalities around things, learning about the land, the culture even more out here, and really hashing out our vision has been quite exciting. for me to just dream up what we really want for our lives, you know, that's, I feel like, such a juicy part about this whole thing. And if anything, I invite more people to really dream up what they want their lives to be, you know, and especially seeing all of the things that are the tyranny coming down and all of that. And there is a lot of fear around what's going to happen, and we don't really know, you know, where things are going to head and which direction things are going to go, but to dream up the best life that we can possibly dream up. And not only that, to set a foundation or a roadmap for other people to live a free life, and a life of abundance, of sustainability, of connection, of spirituality, like all these different things. That's even more precious than even just dreaming up our life, you know, and building our community with founding family. To me, going back to you talking about lead by example, I mean, I'm seeing how powerful that is even with our community, you know, creating or having the Greater Reset here in Morelia and having our family members come up. And then they're learning about what we're doing with our community, buying land, where they get a more clarity in the picture of what we are wanting to do when they're surrounded by all these people who are living all those principles already, you know? And so leading by example is so powerful. I now see my sister diving deeper into all of the Greater Reset videos and all the teachings that all these beautiful people are offering solutions, you know, all the teachings and all the solutions that are being offered. And now she wants to do the same. She wants to find a property for the family, for all of us to be practicing permaculture, to be more self-sustainable, and to like be closer physically to each other, to be more supportive, and so that we can heal each other and help each other heal and just be there for each other. And that's, for us personally, that's what really matters, is being around family. And so she's now looking to the Greater Reset ideas to continue her life and to continue designing her life. And so it's really been a powerful, incredible journey for me, coming up with the Conscious Agora with you and dreaming that up together. And I'm excited to be at the stage that we're at, closing on the land. Thanks to all the beautiful people that we come across in our journey that are supporting in so many ways in one, not just financially, but in so many ways in one. And you know, I feel the excitement all around the world for the Conscious Agora.
I think people are ready, not only just for what we're trying to do, because obviously if you've heard us talk about this or listened to any of my presentations the last couple months or just read the book, this is a vision for a network of communities. So really I haven't come up with the perfect phrase, but I feel like this is Conscious Agora 1.0 or something. You know, it's like this is the very first one, which is going to teach us a lot. Right. And we're going to be documenting this whole process. I've already said we're going to put out like an ebook, like I've seen other communities do this, and a set of video series that'll go into everything we've already done, which is like, okay, we took 3 years to find the right people, 3 years to plan out our agreements and decision making and conflict resolution, and we've gone through ups and downs, and I feel like I've learned a lot of lessons of making mistakes or stumbling, or just, you know, because there's a somewhat of a manual. There's the book Creating a Life Together, which definitely offers a lot of help. Amazing. But it's still about doing it, and then your situation's always going to be different than what the book is. And so there's just so much. Nobody can really walk you through every single step, but you can learn from other people who have done it, and that's what we've been trying to do from our permaculture teachers. You've seen interviews on this channel with the oldest community in Mexico, Huehue Cayotl. We interviewed one of the founders and got to pick her brain, and it's been amazing doing it. And yeah, like you were kind of hinting at earlier, like definitely take the time to figure out what your vision is for a community, you know, because we've spent a lot of time doing that. And especially the last 3 years with COVID, there's been times where we've been like, oh my God, why are we going so slow? Or why is this not moving faster? Or watching other communities like maybe be at a different pace or different things like that. But ultimately it's not a competition, and even you can't allow the state of the world, let it kind of be a signpost, like, okay, there's some scary things going on, this reminds me why I'm doing this. Yes. But don't let it put you in a panic where you're just going like, okay, there's land, here's my money, let me just start doing whatever, and let me throw up a house and do all this, because you one of the things with permaculture specifically is like watching the land during different seasons and the different elements and stuff. And we actually, when we got our permaculture certification, we're helping a gentleman who built his community, his homestead in Costa Rica, and he did it in a way that seemed convenient in the beginning. But then after learning permaculture, he realized like this doesn't really make sense. I'm actually working harder. I'm spending more time walking across the property and doing this and that stuff adds up, right? And so when you do things right with permaculture design in mind, it's easier. It doesn't mean there's no work involved, but you're not going to be doing double work. You're not going to be making things more difficult. So don't be in so much of a rush that you make mistakes. Do actively pursue this vision if this is what you want. Take concrete steps and keep moving the ball forward. And, again, thank you to the people. We've had over 130 something people donate to the campaign. And that's just through the crowdfunding campaign. I mean, I think it's probably 140 between the few of you who've sent some crypto, people who've handed us money at events, a couple people mailed checks. Easily 140 to 150 people from all around the world have donated, supported to us. And we're super excited. I'll just mention that we have we're going to wrap the campaign up at the end of this month, so you'll be seeing this probably tomorrow after we record this. You have till April 1st basically to donate and contribute to the campaign. And if you go to theconsciousagora.com, you can see the link to the crowdfunding campaign, watch the videos, and you can see the different perks. You can get trees, you can in your name, get a brick on our trail in your name, meditation bench, agave planted, just all kinds of cool stuff, so that you are actually a part of the community. And there's webinars, and we have plans for the future. This is just the beginning as far as I'm concerned. I think both of us, this is definitely like a lifelong project that's going to evolve in different ways and going to change. And we've talked about eventually maybe making this a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, and having a token. There's a lot of different things that can happen, but the point is we wouldn't have got it this far without doing it, and it's just that cliche of a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step is absolutely true. So if your journey of 1,000 miles is getting land, homesteading, unschooling your kids, unbanking, whatever it is, you got to start those first steps if you're going to get anywhere.
Yep.
Cool. Well, we've gone almost an hour. Let's go to the last topic that we'll do this today. And then if you guys want to hear more of these conversations, I'll bring Miriam back on the activation, because this podcast is all about the reason I'm doing this podcast and these set of interviews. I think I'm on 23 or 24 now. If you go back and listen to these archives, which I'm very proud of. I mean, you've got Sayer G and Joe Martino and Catherine Austin Fitz and Del Bigtree and so many other great people, known and unknown, who are doing good work and specifically on solutions. And that's what I want this podcast to be about. So, and where we can explore different ideas. And the last thing I want to explore with you, baby, is that both of us, since we've been I think probably before we've been together, but definitely since we've been together, have been like exploring our family's history. And part of that, like you mentioned, coming to Mexico, you felt like an immediate connection. And my family, as far as I know, is not from Mexico, but I do feel a connection to this land. And it's been, I think, the last 7 years of our relationship and our lives in general have been like that journey of reconnecting to where we come from, right? You know that your parents come from two parts of Mexico, but that doesn't necessarily mean, all those people, right? Or those family members and stuff. And I've been on my own journey of learning where my family comes from. And there's like a lot of families with, whether it's immigration or just anybody who has a native ancestry, there's a lot of things lost to the pages of history probably. And probably truly, for most of us, there are lucky ones who are like, there's a pure line to the indigenous traditions that their family has maintained. And, but for most people who are of some mixed native ancestry, it's very difficult to find out where we come from. I know that my mom says the family's been there in Texas forever, right? So going back at least a couple hundred years, I don't know how much further than that. Maybe at some point they did come from Mexico and settled in Texas. My dad's side of the family, Czechoslovakian, which I know a lot about, going like to the village where they're from. That's and amazing. Then it's pretty cool. I hope to visit there one day. And then Seminole is what I was told by my grandmother's side on my father's side is where the native comes from on that. So it's kind of a mix of things for me, and it is very difficult to know where we come from, where I come from. But for me, part of that journey has been like the part of me, besides wanting to know more about the Czech, like the part of me that I've always felt more connected to was the native part. And even before I really fully knew that I had native ancestry in me, just being younger, getting into things like starting with like, let's say, acid and plant medicine, eventually like gaining a respect for that, ayahuasca. I already had an interest in shamanism and native culture, and I think the reason was because of just being connected to it, even though never growing up on a reservation, never being taught these things, most of my family just living like suburban Americans and no history to this. But I've always been drawn to that, and so that led to covering Standing Rock, like choosing those stories because of what they were, going to the San Carlos Apache in Arizona and covering them fighting copper mines, like feeling like, you know what, whenever I can lend my voice to support of Native cause, I want to do that. I want to go learn. I want to meet other Natives, and I want to like hear about their ways and just learn. And so it's been like that journey for me for at least over a decade now, for sure. But it's really kind of taken on a new level with our relationship. Like I had already been going to visit Chief Gray Eagle, who was in the first Greater Reset in Oklahoma in the U.S. at Choctaw Nation a couple of times. But really, once we together, we visited a whole lot. Been there for Sundance and for Sweat Lodge and for grandmother gatherings and all kinds of different things. And in Standing Rock, I got to learn from some Lakota, like sweat lodges and prayers and stuff, and just picking up different pieces. But I guess generally, I just want to give you a chance to share like how that relates to your spiritual / activist journey, how important that is to you, and maybe just why it's important in general for people to think about where they come from.
Well, for me, I think it's important to learn about where I come from, to connect deeper with even my own family members, but also to the land as well. I think a big part of my journey has been recognizing that we don't have a relationship with the land as much as even my grandma had a relationship with the land, and their parents and then their parents and so forth. And noticing how when my parents moved to the U.S., that relationship was no longer desired. But recognizing whenever I speak to my grandma of how much she cares for the land, how much she cares to connect with that, that's something that has sparked up the interest of like where is all that love coming from, And you are so fortunate to have an uncle that has helped, go down your family tree and really find where your family comes from, at least one part of your family. Not a lot of us are that lucky, but I was blessed to have spent a lot of time with my grandma and my mom's side of the family, and we had a conversation where she told me a little bit more of our ancestry, and she said that there is some African American in the family, and there is some Asian and Spanish, which I figured Spanish, of course. And at the same time that I was having this conversation with my grandma, I was also in high school, my last year of high school, taking a forensics class. And at this time in our forensics class, we were learning about how forensic scientists learn about somebody's ethnicity through studying their skull. Like if the skull is all that's left, then that's how there's ways for them to find out. And one of those ways to find out if somebody is Asian is to check their teeth. And so we did teeth molds that year, or that same week actually, that I was having this conversation with my grandma. And there was only 2 other Asians in our class actually. And so I told my class, I was like, oh, look, I don't know how true this is, but my grandma just told me that there's some Asian in our family. So the whole class was just excited to see my molds, right? So
put their forensic skills into action.
We get our molds back, and we put the 2 other students' molds next to mine, and sure enough, we have the exact same kind of like scoop in the back of our 2 front teeth type of thing, and that was some proof. So I got a little bit more confirmation from that right there, but yeah, it's not very common in our family that we have that conversation as to like, where do our family members come from? Where is everybody's roots from, But being here in Mexico definitely has me connecting to that even more. Even if I don't have the information, I have this connection in my heart that I feel to this land out here. And so I am actually very excited that in the coming years, my parents are going to be retiring, and whenever they retire, they're going to be spending more time in Mexico, right? So I did get the chance to speak to my dad's parents before they passed away in the last few years, and I got to talk to them about where they grew up and where their parents are from and where their grandparents are from. So I'm so thankful for that time. So whenever my dad gets to come back, I get to go explore that, that side of the family's lineage. And then when my mom comes, I will actually be spending more time in Veracruz as well, exploring that side of the family and see where the farms were at, see who was there. And
we've also tried to look up like what were the indigenous groups that are based in the region where your parents come from.
Yeah, so I'm excited to learn more about that as well.
Well, that's cool. I hope that we do get to learn more about that. And I want to say that just wherever you come from, this is something that I picked up from John Trudell, who is an amazing Native activist. And if you've heard my music or heard some of my talks, I reference him in my books as well. John Trudell, this Native activist, he has I think a really special talk where he just reminds everybody that no matter where you come from, you're indigenous to some part of the planet. And in fact, and it's really interesting, I'll put the link to it, because he planted that seed in my mind to help other people understand that, because there's so much, division of people, of like, there's so much hatred towards like white people that it does exist in the world today. And I think sometimes coming from a well-intentioned place of like wanting to push back against colonization and colonialism and empire and things that we should be questioning, but it just gets lost in all this like messed up thing, and really then they're like makes some people feel like they need to put themselves down. And also I just think even that term white, it's like very disempowering, as well as black, because Africa is a giant country, and like there's a lot of differences, just like Mexico. Not everybody that's Mexican is the same as the North and the South Mexicans and the East and all that stuff, or up in the mountains and up in the big cities. We're all people, right? But everybody comes from somewhere on the planet. Everybody's indigenous to the planet. But as John Trudell notes, that it's the tribes of Europe who used to be called pagan or druidic or shamanic or whatever, that they were the first ones to get assimilated and to get shoved into whatever he calls it, like a mind virus that took over Europe and then started colonizing all of Europe, and then they got all established and figured they were Christian now, and things evolved. And then they start saying, well, now we need to go around the world, and they start doing the same thing, bringing Christianity and Catholicism and erasing people's identities and traditions, right? So if anything, as John Trudell points out, it's the Europeans that have been colonized the longest, and they're the furthest away from their traditions. So it doesn't matter where you come from. Like, you should, I believe, make an effort to get to know where you come from, and you're more than just a white person or a black person or a brown person or a yellow person. Like, you have traditions, you have a people from some town, from some place, and maybe you don't know exactly all the details, but learn about it as much as you can and get close to it,
I think, if I may say, I think it's really important to learn the pain and the suffering that those people have gone through, that your people have gone through, and then also the suffering that your people have caused too. And not in a sense of like to say like your people did this to my people and like you owe me this, or you should be, you should beat yourself down up for that and stuff. And not necessarily for that, but to understand that like wherever we're native from, wherever it is that like our lineage or like our families come from and all of that, there's been colonization on all sides, of the lineage, or all people have gone through colonization, and it's just an opportunity for us to understand each other and to help each other heal and to help restore the past through compassion and through helping each other out and moving forward in a better way that we know is possible.
And most importantly, as you said, healing that trauma, because all people, no matter where you're from, we have intergenerational trauma. Some cultures perhaps have it worse than others, or depending on where your people come from at what time on this planet. But unfortunately, the history of humanity, even till today, is filled with very much pain, violence, death, murder, colonization, taking away traditions, taking away people's identities. And the only way that's ever going to change is if we, for one, as I said, recognize that you are indigenous, you do have traditions, you come from somewhere on this planet. It might feel like so far away from where you are now, but learning about it, learning where you come from can be an empowering thing. And the more of us do that, and do that in a way that we're open for dialogue, not like you said, like your people did this to my people hundreds of years ago, so I'm mad at you, or I hate you, or this is your fault. If we don't each start to heal it, separately, then we're not going to heal collectively. Yeah.
It's beautiful that we're practicing permaculture, right? And a lot of the permaculture principles and a lot of the practices come from native practices from all around
indigenous
the world.
Traditions,
indigenous traditions. So
absolutely.
We can definitely find different ways to honor and to honor the land, which obviously, was was somebody else's home at some point that was probably taken from them. And yeah, so we can find different ways to honor indigenous traditions in wherever we find ourselves, and and heal the land, heal ourselves through all the different practices that we can bring in, like permaculture.
Awesome. This is a good conversation.
Yeah, I think so.
You enjoy it?
Yeah, definitely.
You have anything else to say?
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Else?
No, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for having me on, and I look forward to seeing what else we come up with, what else we create, and just continue to enjoy life with you.
Where can everybody find you at, baby? You're mainly on Instagram. You have a Telegram channel, though. I'll put the links, but just...
Yes. So I'm on Instagram a lot more than on anything else, but Telegram as well. And I have intentions to just be more active this year around. Maybe even come out with my own podcast. So I'll say it there.
Encourage her to do it. And do you still have your website up?
I do have my website up, so you'll see if you go to the website señoritaalquimista.com, you will see my artwork, you will see...
Yes, we didn't even get into art. That was one other thing I want to talk about. We're already in an hour, so we're going to have to bring her back. Check out her art on Instagram. She recently went to Costa Rica with me, selling her art in the gallery for the second year in a row. She's ready to do your commissioned wood-burned mandalas. If you have a business, if you've got a home with a big, beautiful wood countertop that you want some amazing mandalas burned on it, she's your woman. So
have fun with it.
Yeah, check her out. And thank you guys for listening. As always, remember,
you are powerful,
you are beautiful,
and you are free.
Peace. You have been listening to the Activation Podcast, brought to you by the Conscious Resistance Network. You can find the archives of our show at Pinecast, Spotify, and theconsciousresistance.com. Thank you for listening.